Okay, cool. I'm in the right. I'm in the correct category this time round. All right, let's close that down. Okay, then it looks like we're pretty much ready to begin. Um, Hi, welcome to the stream. As I have said, I'm going to be working on a 3D spaceship, low poly, fit for game engines like Unity or Unreal, etc. We're going to go through a quick bit of like concept art, and then most of the time is going to be spent on making a model in Blender, unwrapping it, getting it ready for texturing, and then doing the texture in Photoshop. Um, so at the end of this, I'm going to be uploading this to my YouTube channel so you can watch it, on demand whenever you want. I'm also going to be uploading the finished model and all of the source files to, I think it's opengameart.org. That way you can download it. It's going to be released under a Creative Commons license. You can put it in any game you want, but I think more importantly, you can like pull it apart, see how it's put together, and then use that as a reference for when you're making your own spaceships. Um, I should probably preface this. I'm not a professional. This is a hobby for me, so you're probably going to see some less than optimal UV unwrapping, but I mean, it has worked for me thus far, and a little bit of inefficiency when you're doing stuff that is so low poly anyway. It's probably not a big deal. It's not like we're going to be pushing any engines to their limits with all of the normal maps and bump mapping, etc. Let's just switch over to a Blender currently. So I have got an input history thing set up, and I think this is going to be useful because Blender uses a lot of keyboard shortcuts. Like to do anything, you're going to be just hitting a lot of keys on the keyboard. And if you are like a beginner, if you have only just started with Blender, you're going to benefit from knowing what keys I'm pressing to do things. I will endeavor to actually explain what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, but this input overlay should just give us a good idea. So if I want to move this, I'm going to hit G and I'm going to hit right mouse to cancel the movement. If I want to rotate it, we can see R. Again, right mouse to cancel it, and scale, stuff like that. We've seen that's an S. Anyway, so hopefully we're going to be creating something a little bit like this. It's not going to be as pretty. This one took me a very, very long time, and I really want to get this stream done in the weekend. So I am going to endeavour to do a slightly simpler, hopefully, spaceship. We'll see how we get on. Anyway, um, let's just get rid of this. So I'm going to reload Blender startup file so we can start again from scratch. So I'm going to hit Control N, and I'm going to just select reload startup file, and we're back here at the beginning. So something that we got to decide is what are we gonna what are we going to build exactly? Like it's always helpful to have a goal in mind rather than just going in completely blind. So some people like to create like plan views, front views, get so some sort of concept like something like this, where we have a top view, we've got a side view, and they're going to use that and import these images into Blender and try and build as close to these as possible. So I tend not to um, try and stick that closely to my original designs just because they're usually quite rough anyway. I prefer to just make something that looks good in 3D rather than something that looks exactly like the sketch that I did. But this is roughly what I'm going to be making today. So some sort of Vic Viper-esque thing with its two fins sticking out the front and then some forward swept wings, because forward swept wings are superior to backward swept wings. I don't make the rules, that's just a fact of life. So I'm going to move this over to a secondary screen and I'm going to use this as just reference. Ooh. And we're going to mostly be working just in Blender here. So what you can do, if you really care about being close to your sketches, what you can do is you can go over here and down into display. If we just open this box, and then we can do trigger quad view, and then we get elevation view. So we've got top, front, right, and then you can do stuff like background images. Here we go, and then we can add an image. So if we open one, let's just grab a random image from my pictures. Pictures. Okay, then we do like concepts, mecha, sure, and then we can have that displayed on like each of our elevations, and then you can try and make your models like exactly match up to the picture that you've got there. But I personally prefer not to do it in this view just because I feel like it constrains you a bit too much. So I'm not going to be using background images, and I'm not going to be using this quad view. So let's just turn this off. I'm just going to hit toggle quad view again. Okay, cool. Let's see if we can find a sensible way of getting all of my secondary screen stuff set up, because at the moment it's a bit of a mess. Sorry. You can tell I'm not a professional streamer or anything. Cool. Brilliant. Right, so let's start from the beginning. So I'm going to reload the startup file. So again, Control N. Oh, it's not doing it. Control N, reload startup file. So by default, Blender is going to give us a cube, that's what we call it, a cube, a light source, and a camera. So in terms of creating game assets, we don't really care about the light source, we don't really care about the camera. These are just for rendering. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to start with a completely empty scene. So I'm going to hit A. A once will deselect anything if you've already got it selected, and then hit A again, it will select everything in the scene. Then I'm going to hit X and I'm just going to select delete. So everything's gone. We're just back down to an empty 3D view, and we're going to start from scratch. So let's start off with a cube. A cube is a good place to begin just because it's a nice simple shape. It doesn't have too much geometry. That is useful for like this low poly sort of style I'm going for. We don't want to start messing around with spheres, which have got far too many vertices, frankly. So we'll start with a cube. And let's just sort of start pulling it out. Oh, I've sort of skipped ahead, sorry, because this comes second nature now. So Blender has two modes that we're really going to care about for the most of this. We've got object mode. So this is where I'm just going to be moving the cube as a whole. I can move it around with G. And it's got, if I hit tab, we enter edit mode. And edit mode lets me select individual vertices and manipulate the individual vertices. So I can stretch this cube out. I can like delete vertices. I can basically edit what the object looks like, whereas this is just move the object as a whole. So if I go into edit mode, what I'm going to want to do is let's see. Let's just go over like the basic tools that Blender is going to give us first. So there are some keys that you're going to be wanting to use all of the time in Blender. These are going to be movement, scale, and rotation. So movement is handled with G. So if I just select all of these vertices, hit G, this allows me to move it around the screen. If I hit R, it's going to rotate it around the median point of all these vertices. And if I hit S, it's going to allow me to scale it up and down. Well, that's gone weird. And so whenever you're doing one of these things, if you left click after you've moved it, it will stay. And if you right click after you move it, it's going to snap back to where it was before. So right click is sort of a cancel in this case. Also, all the selection is done with the right mouse button and not the left mouse button. I'm not entirely sure why. There's probably a reason for it, but it's just a little weird thing of Blender that you've got to get used to. So if I left click, all I'm going to be moving is this like 3D cursor thing. And all that's going to be doing is it's going to be the origin point where I create any new objects. So if I come up here and create a cube, it's going to create it around this 3D cursor thing. So left click is going to be quite boring to us. Anyway, let's get into this. So we've got a cube, let's turn it into a spaceship. So first things first, my spaceships are going to be symmetrical for the most part, quite traditional in that way. Like there's usually a plane in the spaceship which is going to be symmetrical. Like you got your X-wings which have got, it's symmetrical in sort of the XY plane. So if I create a plane, I created a plane in the wrong place because I moved the cursor. So if I just hit T, no, it's not T, it's N. So the 3D cursor has some coordinates here, and we just want to move this straight back to the center. So we can hit 0, 0, and 0. And if I could just create a plane, and then if I rotate, and I can constrain the rotation using X, Y, and Z. So this green line here, this is the Y direction. This red line is the X direction. And then there is no line for this, but the up-down, which is blue on this sort of widget thing, that is the Z direction. So I want to rotate around Y, so I want to rotate around this green line here. So if I hit R and then Y, you can see that we've got a big line that's come up, and that is constraining the rotation around this line. So if I move this plane, it's probably easier if I make the plane bigger. So if I move this plane around the Y axis, you can see that it's going to basically keep the line that goes through the y-axis in the same place. Whereas if I do this without the y, we can start moving it in weird and wonderful ways. So yeah, most spaceships are going to be. Let's just let's just line that up again. So most spaceships are going to probably be symmetrical in this particular plane. Like if I open my original spaceship again, so you'll see that if I move the cursor back to 0, create a plane, rotate this so it's in the Y. So this is going to be the ZY plane. Make it bigger. The spaceship is going to be symmetrical in this plane. But we don't want to deal with this symmetry. That's the word. We don't want to deal with this symmetry manually because trying to set all of these vertices up to be symmetrical is going to be a nightmare. Well, it's going to be impossible. Let's not beat around the bush. Oh. So again, I'm just going to get rid of the camera and the light source. So what we're going to use is a modifier that Blender has got, which will automatically mirror stuff for us. So first things first, we've got to delete all of the geometry which is going to exist in sort of the mirror half of the plane. We don't want to have to worry. Oh, you can turn off right click select. Interesting. The problem is that I've used right click select for like so many years now that it has become second nature. It's just difficult if you're beginning. Yeah, so we've got to delete all of the geometry that is going to exist inside the like the mirrored half of this object. So if we're going to be mirroring in like the YZ plane, if we look at it from the top, essentially we're going to be getting rid of these vertices here, because this bit, like this half here, can I do a, it's like this half here, this is all going to be mirrored stuff, whereas this half here, this is going to be the stuff we're actually going to be editing. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an edge cut. So if we do Control R, this gives us the ability to basically slice any connected edges round in a loop. So I'm going to select this edge here, so you can see that the loop that is created is in this in this YZ plane. And then if I left click now, we can now decide where between, oh, I don't know how to describe it, like where on this loop the edge will go, but we want it exactly in the center because we're going to be mirroring it. So instead of left clicking again, we're going to right click, and that's going to cancel the movement of this sort of loop that we've got going on. So if I just do that again, I hit Control R, this allows me to create a loop, and I can create it around any like set of connected faces that I like. Basically, it's going to be determined based on what edge you're pointing at. So I'm going to left click to confirm that I want the loop. And then if I left click again, we're going to confirm we want the loop at a position, but we don't. We want the loop in the exact center. So after we've got the loop selected, we're going to right click. It's going to snap directly back into the center. So this gives us some extra geometry in this YZ plane. And now we're able to get rid of the geometry which is going to bleed over into this like other half of the scene. So I'm going to hold, actually no, I'm going to deselect everything first. So I'm going to hit A, and then I'm going to hold shift, and I'm going to right click on the vertices that we want to delete. So this is, you know, it's going to be the same sort of process that you use for like file explorers. Shift and clicking is going to select you multiple files. In Blender, shift and clicking is going to select you multiple vertices. So I'm going to grab these 4 vertices, and then I'm going to delete them. So I'm going to hit X, and because we're in edit mode, so we're going to be editing actual vertices, we've got a choice of deleting the vertices, the edges, the faces, and then other things which I've never used, so I don't actually know what they do. But in this case, we just want to kill these vertices, so we're going to select vertices. So now we've got half a box. Ooh, exciting. And we are now ready to set up our mirror modifier. So we come over to this panel here, so it's under this spanner option. We've got add modifier. So by default, it opens on this. So this tab is the render tab, and then you've got a bunch of different things. So it's the spanner tab that you want for modifiers, add modifier, and there are tons of things, most of which I don't know what they do, but the one we're going to want is going to be mirror. So if we just select that, it's going to automatically mirror in the YZ plane. I don't know if that actually is clever enough to work out what sort of geometry you've got, and then it will mirror it based on that, or whether YZ is just the default plane to mirror in. But if we go back into object mode, we've got what looks like just the cube that we started with. But in edit mode, you'll see that we actually only have vertices in one half of the scene. And then if we start editing these vertices, so like I grab this one, and I'm going to hit G and pull it out, the changes that I'm making are being mirrored in this YZ plane. So if I then just left click, you can see now we've got an object which is symmetrical in this YZ plane. I don't really want that though. Let's just put that back where it was. So hit Control Z a couple of times. So with the mirror modifier, you've basically got two main modes that you can change between. So at the moment, we've got clipping unselected. And what that means is if we move the geometry in the half that we can actually edit around, it's not going to stick to this YZ plane in any way. And you can move it over the YZ plane. So you can have stuff on either side of like this invisible mirror that we've got set up. But if we set it to clipping mode, you can see that the vertices that are on this YZ plane are going to stay on the YZ plane. So if we go back to not clipping, the vertices that were on the YZ plane are being pulled away from the plane into just like these two separate objects. Whereas in the clipping mode, if they're on the YZ plane to start with, they're going to stay on the YZ plane. And it's also going to prevent us from moving any vertices over into like the mirror half of this world. So if I try and push stuff over, so you see I'm moving my mouse to the left, which would normally move stuff into the mirrored half. It's actually just pushing up against this sort of invisible mirror that it's got set up. And it's not letting me go any further. So I tend to do everything with clipping on. It's really helpful for not accidentally having like part of the geometry just slightly over the line. So there's actually some repeated geometry here, which would show up a lot if you were to texture this. And we really don't want to do that. So we're going to move the stuff over into its side, and we're going to make sure that it doesn't go over to the other side. So yeah, I keep clipping on unless I specifically want like a box over here somewhere to not be connected at the center. So if I turn clipping off, I can create like a cube that gets mirrored on both sides. And then that's a good reason to have clipping off, but for the most part, we're just going to go with the clipping on. Okay, so I've got a cube, I've got it mirrored, so anything that I do on this side is now going to be repeated on the other side. So I'm pretty well set up to just start creating a spaceship. So is there anything else I want to go over first? Yeah, actually, it's probably worth going over like viewports. So Blender is one of the programs that you're going to want to have a numpad for, because the numpad is just, it's invaluable for actually moving your camera around. You can middle click, and that is just going to rotate the camera around wherever the center is, which is fine for just like, you know, if you want to zoom around and look at a specific part. But if you want to get like a precise view, like you want to get exactly top down, it's going to be hard to make sure that you are like exactly top down. So the numpad 1, 7 and 3 are going to allow us to snap the camera to one of the orthogonal views. So 1 is going to give us a front view, 7 is going to give us a top view, and 3 is going to give us a side view. I suppose top is a bit of an arbitrary distinction. I'm saying the upward Z, like the forward Z, that is pointing upwards. So if I'm looking down at the top of Z, I consider that to be like the top. That's where 7 will put us. And numpad 5 will switch between perspective and orthogonal camera. It's a bit hard to explain, but if I hit numpad 5, you can see what it's kind of done is it's changed the way that the camera is rendering the like points in space. So if I have it in perspective mode, things further away from the camera are going to appear smaller. So if I make this like really long, so if I select all, scale it, and then lock it to the Y direction, and I look at the front, you can see this line here, which is close to the camera, is much longer than this line here, which is further away from the camera. But if I hit 5 and go into the orthogonal view, the edge that is closest to the camera is the same length as the edge that is far away from the camera. So when we import this model into a game, it's not going to look like this. No game uses orthogonal cameras, as far as I know. I suppose you could argue that an isometric game does, but those are sort of the exception rather than the rule. So yeah, so this is a good camera if you want to see what is your thing going to look like in a game. And then orthogonal is good if you want to get any like precise measurements. So if I hit like 7 in orthogonal view, the vertices at the bottom are going to line up exactly with the vertices at the top, which is very good if you want to just get stuff aligned on like a certain plane. Okay, so I covered the camera, so I think we'll just start creating. So we're going to see like a combination of doing a lot of this. Oh, no, not that. Control R. So we're going to be using this edge divider thing again, because that's a really good way of just creating additional geometry. And we're going to be seeing a lot of the use of E, which is going to be extrude, which is going to create extra geometry like this. So it takes it will take a face, and it's going to create like what's the word? What is the general term for a cuboid? It's a prism. That's it. It'll take a face and basically turn it into a prism. So you're just like pulling a cuboid out of this square face. Cool. So let's start creating. So we're doing a sort of Vic Viper sort of design. We're going to have the 2 forward prongs, and we're going to have the forward swept wings. So a good place to start is just to like get the general shape of the whole thing in like a really boxy form. So if I grab the back of this and move it back, let's extrude out the side here. So creating some extra geometry, and then we're going to extrude out the front. Did I mention extrude is on E? Most of these tools are using sensible names. It is really tricky to describe what it is. Yeah, so extrude is on E. Just you hit the E button and then you can create a trapezium out of that. Ooh. So these are going to be like our forward prongs. I'm not going to do the wings yet. It's very tempting to start pulling out like a wing shape. So I could create like a very thin segment here. Oh, and when you're doing this sort of edge loop thing, if you do the scroll wheel, you can decide how many splits you're doing. So that is a lot of splits. So if I scroll up once, I get 2. And then I can hit, with those still selected, I can hit S for scale and then Z to lock it to the vertical axis. I just bring these down close together. So that gives us like a thin bit of geometry here, where we can start pulling out a wing if we want. So if I hit Control Tab 3, that switches over from vertex mode to face mode. So Control Tab 1 is vertex mode. Control Tab 2 is edge mode, so you're selecting edges. And then Control Tab 3 is you're selecting faces. So in this face mode, I can come here, I can take this little thin bit, and then I can hit E, and I can extrude a wing. It's a very boxy wing, but it is a wing. This is very tempting to do early, but this always comes back to bite me in the bum, because now I've got this quite tightly packed geometry that I have to start manipulating on its own. And I really don't want to have to deal with that at the beginning of a model. So I'm actually going to get rid of this wing. Just keep hitting Z. So your undo is actually going to go back through all of the like selections you do, not just modifications. Which is good if you got like something selected and you accidentally select another thing. So I hit right click here. You'll go, oh, whoops, I actually wanted those other things selected, so just Control Z. We go back to our previous selection. So this is really boxy, but we can start working with this and start introducing a bit more geometry to start unboxying it. That's a term. It's definitely a term. So if I just go back into vertex mode, so immediately I've made the gap between the prongs smaller, and now I've got some non-orthogonal geometry going on. So just to keep things easy on myself, I'm going to move these two vertices at the back, and I'm going to have them in line with these vertices here. So if I go into the top view again, I can come down here. So at the moment we've got snapping on increment, but if we go up here and we change the snapping to vertex, it means that if I move these vertices, so I'm going to press G for move, then I'm going to press X to move them on this plane, and then I'm going to hold Control. And what this is going to let us do is it's going to let us snap these vertices to any existing vertices. So you can see if I go to this vertex, it's snapped in this plane that I've defined to the same X position as this vertex. Same with over here. And this is the one we actually care about. This is the vertex we want to snap with. So while I'm just holding down Control, I'm going to hit left click, and we have now got these vertices in line with the vertices at the front here. That is going to become really useful later on. Like at the moment, that was something I just wanted to do to make things neat, but snapping to like positions is really useful. So let's just start and try and make this less boxy. So let's introduce some slightly less thin geometry around the side here. And let's take the edges in a bit. So if we grab these particular vertices and then just start moving them over in the X plane, we're immediately starting to bevel stuff and things are starting to look a little bit less boxy. So we kind of want the front fins to come in a bit, so we can take those in, we can take the front bits in even further. We're probably going to want to scale down like the front bits in the Z direction as well. So if I select these ones and then do scale Z, there we go. So we're already doing something about this sort of very boxy shape. And really, so again, this sort of edge cut thing is super useful for just creating more interesting shapes. So if I add these bits in here, I can start pulling vertices out like to the side. Start just trying to get some more interesting shapes going on here. Hit 7 to lock it to the top-down view. And you can see I'm doing a lot of my measuring just by eye. It's something I had to get into my head. This is not computer-aided design. We're not creating like components that need to be accurate to the nearest micron or anything. This is something that's going to go into a game. As long as it looks good to the human eye, that's all you really need. So I'm not worrying too much about getting things like perfectly lined up. I'm just, does it look good to naked eye? And that's what I'm going with. Okay. So I'm thinking I don't want this bottom bit to be quite so flat, so let's pull down these vertices. Let's try and get some more angled shapes going on here. And there's perhaps less to talk about now I've gone over like the basic controls, but we're just going to sort of come through here. and start adding geometry. So I want some air intakes. So let's extrude up so we can get some like extra geometry at the front here. So if I just moved it up, we'd get angles and stuff, which is fine on its own. But if we extrude up, we can get this sort of front facing geometry, and we can just turn that into like an air intake. Maybe do it at the side as well. Again, this is a place where Vertex snap is going to be super useful. So if I snap these vertices to the Y plane, and I can just bring them in line with these ones that I've moved, just so easily. And we want to join up these. We don't want to have this little gap sitting here. So we want to join up this bit of geometry. So let's delete the inner bit. So if I do delete with X and then vertices, that's got rid of all the geometry in here. And we can just fill that in again. So we select the 4 vertices that will form a plane, and we'll hit F for fill, and that will just create a plane between those 4 vertices. So do it again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then F. We've now got some geometry going on up here. You can do the same thing for triangles. So 3 vertices, then F, 3 vertices, then F. I do have my sketches on the other screen. Although I'm not actually using, so here's the sketch that I was showing off earlier, which is a super sleek sort of design. You see that this sort of design is coming out a bit more boxy, and that's because I'm actually following a sketch that I've got on a little notepad, just sort of propped up against my second monitor, because I wanted this ship to be a bit more chunky, a bit more playful, I guess. Sorry, excuse me, I'm just going to have a drink of water. I'm back. Yeah, so I'm working from a physical sketchbook, so unfortunately you can't really see that on this particular stream. So I'm actually going to bring these even closer together. I don't want a very thick gap in the middle here. Yeah, I tend to freestyle the geometry because, I mean, it's completely valid to have your plans all set out and you want to stick to them as close as possible, but I find that I'm not good enough at drawing 3D objects so that my 2D drawings actually look good in 3D. So I tend to just go from like 3D principles first, and if I make it look good in 3D, it doesn't matter if it's not perfect on my drawing, because my drawing is just there as a sort of guide for me. So I'm actually going to bring this bit up as the sort of cockpit area. So I'm going to hit E for extrude, and I'm going to sort of lock its height to the height that we've got back here. And again, I'm going to delete the sort of inner geometry and use F to just sort of fill in the gaps. The problem with 3D modeling is that your models do look very ugly for quite a long time, unfortunately. kind of actually want to bring this back a bit so that the angle is different on the front here. Do you think I should play some music on this? I was kind of worried about trying to get copyrighted songs. Well, not getting copyrighted songs. I just figured that if you want to have music, so you're not listening to me working in silence for when I don't have anything to explain, you could always put your own music on. I think I'm going to bring this in a bit. I don't like it overhanging. This is very boxy. I think I'll bring like the whole of this front bit down a bit. So hit 3, get side view, and then just bring the whole thing down. Actually, if anything, I'm going to move that bit back up again so it's all angled. I kind of feel like this shouldn't be flush with like the bottom of these sort of forks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these bits of geometry here and I'm going to get rid of them. So X, I'm not going to delete vertices because if I delete vertices, it's going to take these vertices here. So that one there, that one there, that one there, and I'll lose these faces as well, like that. So it's actually deleting a lot more than it perhaps looks like it would. But if I just delete faces, it's just going to take out the faces there. I think I'm going to take out these faces at the front here too. So if I go back to vertex selection, I'm going to bring this cockpit down into the sort of gap area a bit. Yeah, yeah. Don't, yeah, I'd say don't listen to me in silence because it's weird and awkward. Put your own music on in the background. That way I won't get a music label coming around and breaking my kneecaps. So right now I want to start moving geometry down into this gap. But if I look at it from the side, I can't actually see in that gap because I've got the sort of prongs in front of me. So there's an option down in the bottom bar. Is it this one? Yes. So limit selection to visible. If I click that, now the geometry, which would normally be hidden behind a surface, is going to be displayed in sort of a ghost mode. That means if I start bringing geometry down this center bit, so I hit E to extrude. So if I've just got like a line selected and I hit E, instead of getting a prism out of it, I'm just going to get a plane out of it. So if I come down, so we're in the side view and I hit E, we're going to be able to see the geometry like appearing behind the sort of side of the prongs. And I've hit E again, I can just keep making this sort of cockpit area. I think that's as far down as I want it to go. So I'm now going to just bring it back to, that vertex there is probably a good point to bring it back to. So I'm going to hit Control. I'm going to pin it back to that vertex position. And so now we've got this sort of extra geometry here. And we can actually see what we're doing using the limit selection to visible. Of course, now we've got some faces which are intersecting each other. So I'm going to delete the offending faces. Oh, so let's fill that face in. Let's add a bit of geometry here. So we're not getting the overlapping face. So I'm going to hit R. Oh, hit R here. And we're going to bring the edge cut right up so it's touching where I put the original bit of geometry. Like I said, this isn't computer-aided design, so as long as it looks close, that is good enough for me. And then I'm going to do another R here, and I'm going to bring this down so that the vertex is as close as possible to this other vertex. I think I've slightly missed it. Yeah, I've slightly missed it. Let's try that again. Closest makes no difference, don't you think? Cool. So now we've got two vertices in the same position, but they're connected to like different edges. So that vertex is connected to this edge, and this edge. And you can see by the way that it has sort of got like a gradiated selection on these edges. Whereas the other vertex is connected to this edge, and this edge. So we got these vertices in the same position. So let's merge them. So one way you can do is you can select all the vertices you want to merge, then do Alt M, and then you can select at first, last, center, cursor, collapse. Or, which is my preferred way of doing it, you've got this option here, automatically merge vertices moved to the same location. So if I turn this on, they won't merge until I move something. But then if I grab this one with G, and then I do snap to vertex with control, and then left click, it has merged the two vertices together. So now those are not two separate vertices, they are the same vertex. And that's really helpful. Because it means that, oh, I've got this extra geometry I want to clean up. I can literally just grab it with G, move it to another position, and it's going to merge it, and then get rid of the extra geometry. So this is one of the biggest tools that I use all the time. It's just amazing for cleaning up additional geometry that you don't want. Like this vertex here, it's not doing anything for us. We don't need it. This is a whole flat area. So I can just do Control G and merge it in, and I can take that one, again, flat area, it's not doing anything. Control G, merge it in there. Same with this one, merge it in. And this one, honestly. Oh no, that you can't. Okay, you can't do that one because we do need this bit here. But I am slightly prematurely optimizing this. I'm actually going to undo this because when you've got triangles and like pentagons, etc., Control R doesn't work very well on them. So you can see that it's not allowing me to create an edge loop in this triangle section. It's just being cut off here. That's really annoying. So if I just go back to where it's a square, I can actually do the edge loop all the way up to the center. Sorry, edge cut, not edge loop. So I've got an extra, edge down here. So this one here, this is going to actually be a hidden edge once I sort of sort out how solid this is. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to delete that edge. Oh, that's deleted that face. That's unfortunate. But that's okay. We've got the three vertices. We'll just select them and hit F again, fill that in. We're going to do the same here. We're going to do three vertices. Actually, let's do it as a quad. So 4 sides. Select the 4, hit F. And that's going to create a plane here. I forget what it's called. I just know it as that thing that happens when you do Control R. Let's see. Blender, Control R. So the official Blender manual calls this a loop subdivide. So apparently that's what it's called, a loop subdivide. I just call it Control R. Oops, no, I don't want to delete that. Again, I'm going to grab 4 vertices and I'm going to do fill. So there is actually I'm sure there is an edge loop option. Is it Control E? So we've got edge loops. Select a loop of connected edges by connection type. That might be what happens if you do Alt click. So if I do Alt click here, that's not a good example. If I create like a cylinder, oh, and I do alt click, oh, let's get rid of that. If I do alt click on this edge here, it's actually going to select these whole set of connected edges. Same at the bottom, it's just going to select those things. I think that's maybe what edge loop refers to in Blender. Not entirely sure. Anyway, let's get rid of, oh no, let's just get rid of this cylinder that I've added. So 2 ways of doing this really. We've got a box select. So if I hit B, I get this thing which allows me to just select stuff on a box. That's one way of doing it. Another way would be you select one vertex and then you hit Control L for linked, and that's going to get us all of the vertices which are connected to that one vertex. So if I do a vertex over here and do Control L, it's going to select my spaceship because these are all connected together some way or another. If I do it over here, Control L, it's just going to select that. So I don't know. I think I use a combination of the box and the linked. So I've selected all that, hit X, vertices, that's gone. Cool. I was working over here. So let's grab another. So I could grab 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hit F. That's created me a pentagon. We don't really want to do that because the way that game engines are going to deal with this mesh is they're going to want to turn everything into a try. So if I get a cube actually. So ultimately, when models are being rendered, they're going to be rendered using tries. If you've got a square, there are 2 ways of making tries out of it. You can cut it like this. So we've got 1 try and then the other try. Or you could do this. So 1 try, the other try. So there's only 2 ways of doing that really. But if you've got a pentagon, how are we going to make a pentagon here? I know, I'll create, was it edge subdivide or whatever? Oh, no, X, that's the one I want. And if I just merge these faces together, so I can do dissolve faces. And let's do that there as well, actually. Oh, so if you hit space, it gives you a search bar, so you can search for tools. It's really useful if you don't remember the exact key combination. So we've got a 5-sided thing here. How many ways can we turn this into tries? Well, we could do that. That's one way. So 1, 2, 3. Or we could do it like that. Or we could do it like that. Or we could do it like that. Basically, it starts getting really complicated really quickly. So we're going to want to try and keep everything as either in quads because they're easy to work with because you can do the edge subdivide on them, or tries because that's what the game engine is actually going to render. So this shape that I've created with 5 sides, I'm actually going to turn this into a quad and a triangle. So I'm going to use the knife tool, which is on K. I'm going to select one vertex. I'm going to drag a line across to another vertex. And then if I hit enter, that's going to create a new edge on this face that splits it into 2. So now we've got a quad, 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. We've got a try, 1, 2, 3 sides. I kind of think that these like prongs are a bit too chunky. I might move this up. I kind of want them to be tapered at the front, so I'm going to do this one at a time because I want to be able to decide exactly where like these things go. When did I go to perspective mode? So if I do this one at a time. Cool. And let's just taper these prongs in a bit. So G for movement and an X to bring them in. Yeah, it's looking better already, a lot more smooth. Let's bring that very front bit in a bit. So I'm going to scale it. So I want to move the top bit down. I want to move the bottom bit up. So I could just do this and then move that, take it with G and then snap it to Z and move that up and down. Same with the bottom. So G for move, Z for the constraint, and then move it up and down. But I want to move these in by the same amount. So I'm going to select both sets. I'm going to hit S for scale, then limit that to Z. And I can just bring them in both at the same time. That means that we're going to have equal height on either side of this. Let's do it again for this one, so we are tapered a bit more. Oh. So scale, Z. Oh dear. We've got two vertices that I thought were connected and are not actually. Oh, so this is actually a good way, a good time to demonstrate something else. So center my camera is somewhere around here, based on when it's rotating. So that's where the center of the camera is. I want to get up close and personal with this vertex here. So with it selected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the decimal point button on the number pad, and that has now recentered the camera on this vertex. So now if I move around, that vertex is going to stay in the center of this camera. So if I zoom in and start moving around, I can see what is going on here. So with this merge vertices setting turned on, I'm going to just take this one, this vertex, I'm going to snap it to this other vertex, and now they've merged together. So we've just got one vertex here now. I think I'll bring this in even further actually. I think it's maybe got a bit too chunky on the bottom. I'm going to start again at the bottom. Just going to grab these faces and I'm going to get rid of them. I mean, I said I wanted to make this chunky, but I don't want it to be like a brick. A flying brick is not the most exciting shape in the world. Let's bring this back a bit. So extrude once again. So that's a sort of interesting shape that's got some sort of variation going on here. I'm going to bring these faces back so they're... So I'm going to hold Shift and right click here. No? Shift Control right click, that was it. And that's going to try and select all of the faces on sort of journey between the first one you select and the second one. So it's going to go face, 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 and then face, 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 and it's going to select all of them. I'm never exactly sure how that's going to, behave, but it's a quick way of selecting multiple things at the same time. got some interesting shapes going on here. Probably what I will do is I will pull these ones in. Oh yeah, Control-Shift-Click works not just for faces but vertices. So it will look for the shortest line between two vertices, and it will select everything on that line. So if I select this one, Control Shift and then select this vertex, it's going to select these vertices because this is the shortest line between the 2 points. So this one, and I want to select all of these along here. If I then do Control Shift, that it's going to select all the vertices on the path between the 2 points. I don't know if Alt Click would actually work here. No, see, it gets a bit confused because of the extra geometry up here, or perhaps this plane here, that it doesn't want to edge select all of this at once. So in that case, if you wanted to get these selected, you'd use the Control Shift and right click. This bit up here is looking very flat. I think what I might do is bring this down a bit so it's not flush with like this center line going along here. So if I delete this face and this face, go back to vertex mode, bring this one down so it's no longer in line. I'm going to have to delete that face as well. And it extrudes down a bit with this one. And then extrude over. So I'm going to lock to X, just bring it close. It doesn't have to be exact. We'll sort it out in a sec. And then bring these with snapping to merge into the existing geometry. And then we'll link these ones together. And we'll link that together. That's a bit more interesting, just having a bit of texture up there. It's very tempting to start adding a lot of geometry, which, you know, it's fine if you're not doing low poly, but low poly can quickly become like medium poly if you're not careful. I know what I don't like. This bit here is too flat. I don't want that flush with the top. So start bringing these vertices down. And again, I'm just doing this by eye. I'm not worrying about it being perfectly in line, because if you're playing a game with this asset in, you're not going to be getting a ruler out and measuring everything. This is indeed a very chunky boy. What if I made this flatter? No. I could make it a little bit flatter. Are these actually still lined? They are. Yes. Okay, that's fine. It's the danger of having the show invisible geometry on. It's very easy to select the wrong vertex. So we've got like a bunch of vertices in the line here. But if I turn that mode off, I can only select the vertex at the front. I think like a lot of things, you just have to sort of switch back between modes as they become useful. Oh, that bit's a bit. That looks fine from the front, but then you go around here and you realise it's sticking out too much. Oh, I really need to do something about this back. It is so flat and ugly. Right, I know what I want at the back is I want 3 engines essentially. So if I create those now as sort of just like guides. So a cylinder by default is way too many vertices for a low poly ship. So I'm gonna, as long as you don't move anything in the cylinder, you can just change the number of vertices it generates with. So let's just take this down to 8. Might be a bit too low because if you are playing like, I don't know, Star Fox type game, you're going to be looking at the engine the whole time. So the back is quite important to look decent. So I'm going to go with just 10. It's low poly enough that it doesn't sort of break the aesthetic, but high poly enough that it doesn't look like you've just got some octagons stuck back there. And let's rotate it so that it's sort of in an engine sort of direction. So hit R, constrain it to the X thing, so it's rotating like this. And then we can just do this by eye, but if I'm rotating something like orthogonal, this is the one time I will actually measure it, and you can actually just type in an angle. So if I type 90, it will just rotate exactly 90 degrees, or exactly a right angle. And let's just move this. Oh, let's just move this to where an engine will go. Might need to make it a bit smaller. Oh. So this is why these orthogonal views are so useful, because you can align one in one view and then move it in another view, and then it's in the right position. So let's have them taper a bit because that's more interesting. And you're not going to see this face, so I'm going to delete it. Now, as for a central engine, I could do the same thing again. So is it still set to 10 vertices? It is. But if I bring it in at the moment, oh, hang on, let's move it back a bit so we can see. If I bring it in again, the clipping is going to defeat us and it's going to make it look really weird. It's sort of been flattened against the mirror plane. So what I will do is, what will I do? I'll do what I did with the cube. I will cut it down the center, so I've only got half a cylinder, and then I'll move that onto the plane of the mirror. So I'm going to select all of the faces that will be on the other side of the mirror. I'm going to kill those. I have to kill the top and bottom. Oh, but then I will reinstate the top and bottom as half faces. So I'm just going to select these vertices, hit F. Now if I select everything, oh, no, not everything. I want to select linked. So Control L, and I'll move this into the center. So if I can get it onto the center line, it will just start behaving like the rest of the object. So at the moment, it's 2 separate things. But if I move it into the center and try to move it out again, it's now glued together. That's slightly too thin. It doesn't quite look like a circle anymore. So I'm going to turn on the option that lets me select all of the vertices, even the ones behind. I'm going to go back to the top view. I'm going to grab these vertices with the box. I'm just going to move it out on the x-axis a bit until it looks like it's actually equal. That looks about right to me. So I just grab the linked vertices and I rotate again. So R, rotate in the x-axis and then 90 degrees. Oh, here's a downside. Scaling does not happen on the center because the center of these select objects is, well, it's where the white circle is. Where really, if we want to scale this, we want to scale it in the plane there. What is the way of solving this problem? So what I can do is I can do cursor to selected, snap cursor to selected. So I put the 3D cursor on this plane now in the center here. Then I will grab all of the vertices and I'm going to change the center point, okay, pivot point, from median to 3D cursor. Now all of the scaling is going to happen around exactly where the 3D cursor is. So if I scale it now, yeah, so that's going to work as basically we want it to. The only downside is that I can't move this until I'm done. That's basically what I want. So if I now move this, I do kind of want it a bit bigger. I'm going to have to move the 3D cursor as well again. So space for the search, and then we do cursor to selected. Oops. That's kind of where I want the engines to be. Yeah. Oh, and once again, this face is not going to be seen, so we'll get rid of it. I want to scale it again. I'm going to have to move the cursor. So in this time, I'm just going to grab these two so that the cursor ends up on like this plane here. Because it highlights the previously selected option, I don't have to type it in. And then we're going to grab all of these vertices and we're going to scale again. Yeah, that's pretty good. So I could try to integrate these shapes here with like the hull that I've got going on. So I could try you know, using the fill button to connect them directly to it. But because these are, you know, difficult shapes to work with, they're, you know, well, they're not round, but they are like some facsimile of round. It's going to be a pain to get things all nicely lined up with each of these vertices. So I'm actually not going to do this at all. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just treat these engines as separate objects. In fact, I'm going to hide them for now. So I'm going to hit Control L. So I'm going to select a vertex on one engine, a vertex on another engine, Control L, and then I'm going to hit H to hide them. I'm going to pretend they're not there for a second. And then I am going to make the back of this look not terrible. Yeah, not terrible. Is that in line? Yes, I moved them in line. I don't want that. make this too flat. I think what I've got, a problem I've got here is too much geometry, so I'm going to start simplifying it by merging the vertices into each other. I kind of want this section to be slightly detached from... Sorry, I just bumped my mic. What if I bring these bits forward? Oh, that's a bit more interesting. Oh, when you go into object mode, it unhides everything. It's a quick way of seeing what it looks like. So if I fill this in now, oh, dangers of not hiding geometry. There we go. These are close enough together, I might as well just merge them. What to do with this though? I don't want a pentagon for reasons already explored. Oh god, that actually looks really ugly. Oh no. What can we do here? First of all, I'm sloping the back of this. So I'm actually going to rotate this whole section. Oh, because I've got it on 3D cursor mode. Put it back to median point. Let's get this whole back section sloped downwards. So we're going to taper towards where the engines are. Where are the engines? Oh, that actually lines up quite nicely. It's starting to look a bit sleek, isn't it? Let's get rid of these. I don't like those faces. Let's unhide the engines. Yeah, that fits in quite nicely just there. Obviously, this needs to be brought forward a bit now that I've moved this section forward. So I'm using Alt-click here to select the edge. I'm just going to move this down. Oh, wrong position. Do I want the engines to be that long? I'm not sure I actually do. So I might just move the whole engine. Okay, it's going to have to be a bit longer, but yeah, it's quite pleasing to me. Maybe move them out a bit. Ah, that's unfortunate. What if this was sort of an overhang? So if I extend this bit out, bring it down a bit, but then the actual back half is going to be flush with like the engines. So I can do it, extend here, just take it along on the x-axis. Yeah, I quite like that. So it's sort of a cowl that goes over the engines. Again, I am very close to making this not low poly anymore, so I've got to be careful here. But I can afford, you know, how many vertices have we got? 133. So it's not actually going to count the mirrored side. So yeah, 244 apparently, including the mirrored side. But if I just make this, yeah, so what I can do is I might bring this down so that it sort of, the bit that sticks out sort of becomes flush with the rest of the shape. Oh, no, I can't do that because the engine's in the way. I can do it just at the end though. Oh, again, having lots of parallels, it's great for working, but it just doesn't look that good when it's finished. So maybe I'll bring this in a bit. Oh, way too far. Maybe if I just bring that way. No, I don't mind that bit. I don't mind that shape that we've got going on. Yes, I do. It's horrible. Oh, maybe if I just bring this. Is that good? Oh, yeah, I quite like that actually. If I just bring this bit back, the engine is definitely peeking through, but we can adjust that. Yeah, that's good. I'm actually going to delete this face. I'm going to grab all of the vertices at the back here, and I'm just going to extrude so that they go perfectly horizontally. So I'm going to hit E, and then I'm going to hit Y. Just bring these back so that they're perfectly flat, so we get this sort of thin overhang sort of shape going on. This is just going to have to be smaller, isn't it? Which means moving the 3D cursor again. There we go. So I want to get all these vertices that I've extruded, I want to make them all aligned. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a scale on the y-axis, and then I'm going to hit 0, and that's going to bring them all perfectly in line with the y-axis. And then I just have to move them back to a decent position. I'm going to do the same thing here. So extrude, clamp to Y, then scale, clamp to Y, and then 0. Oh, not X, I want to move it back Y. I think I actually do want it to be flush with like this line here, so I'm going to clamp it at that vertex. And I'll do the same here. Ooh. So GX, control clamp, not GX, GY, control clamp there. Maybe if I move this up, oh, that's way too thin. You can start seeing the two faces clipping through each other when I do that. That's not what we want. Look, we've got some Z fighting going on. Oh, it's all right. I think I want to make this in line with this plane here. So I'm going to create some new geometry with the edge subdivide. Oh, actually, I need to align this, so I'll do it on this view. There we go. Now I'll just bring this over, clip it in. Okay, and now I'm going to fill in this back bit that I've created. Just going to do a Control F. What do we think? Kind of feel like the overhang needs to be connected a bit differently. I quite like the bottom of it. Or do I? Maybe. I know. I'm going to need to use the knife tool. So it's actually a time where perspective is going to be helpful. So I can just get in here with the knife tool and I can slice this back panel up. Let's just bring this particular bit forward. Backwards, rather. Yeah, I like that well enough. Again, I'm going to hide these engines. Let's slice here as well. I fear that I've overcomplicated this design a bit. But I like the cover. Maybe if I just get rid of the bottom bit. If I bring this vertex down. just feel like it's just a bit blobby, like there's no defined shape going on. I usually work a model quite a bit before I'm happy, which is probably why, you know, professionals do actually concept art their top and plan views. Median point, please. Let's just make the bottom of this flatter, and then we'll use we'll use the engines to sort of give it some texture. So if I bring this in, I say that a lot, bring this in. Oh, we got some wayward vertices in here. Cool. And then what we'll do is we'll bring this forward, scale it up. Oh, for goodness sakes. Oh. Scale it up, forward again. Forward again, and then scale it down. So just bring the whole thing down a bit. So G, Z. It's just still too flat. I think I'm happy with this overall shape now. I like the engine sort of sticking out the bottom. Those will look better when they get textured. What I really need to do is do some cleanup because there are lots of vertices in here at the moment. So these vertices are unnecessary. They're just sort of splitting up a perfectly good flat face. So let's merge them into existing vertices. Can we do without these ones? Just have the whole thing slope back? Yeah, I think we can actually. Let's do that. I'm going to need to cut that one because we've got a pentagon here. Okay, I'm happy with the engine, so I am going to hide these ones for good now. Let's just focus on cleaning up this bit. Don't really need that vertex. Or this one, honestly. So this is where this snap to vertex becomes really useful. And just tidying up geometry like this. Like this whole section is just flat, so in fact we can move this one. Oh no, we can't, because that defines the edge of that shape. Okay. Now this bit here is going to be a problem. Unfortunately, I don't really like that either. What I will do is I'm going to extrude this single vertex into a line, and then I'm going to make this bit here a plane. Then I'm going to make that a plane, and that a plane. I think that's better than what I had before. Right, so I've got the sort of overall shape. I think time to add some wings now. Now we're at the end, or at least we've got like what we want. We can afford to add some geometry for the wings. So I want to have the wings. Actually, what if this was swept forward? Yeah, so if I sweep that forward, then I can bring the wings forward on that sweep. So I'm actually going to dissolve these two faces into a pentagon. Oh, I've hit in caps at some point. That's not a pentagon, that's a square, quadrilateral. So I'm going to make a sort of diamond shape, which is going to define the wings. So then if I extrude this diamond shape out, bring it forward, make it smaller at the edges. I think make it vertically smaller at the edges. And then some small like flaps up near the front would be good. again, diamond shape. Oh, no, too far down. Let's bring those up a bit. Want a vertical stabilizer on the back for that full Vic Viper experience. So I'm actually going to not go all the way to the end here. I'm going to cut it off early. Just leave it like that. And what if I did something really stupid? Can't help but feel like, I don't know. If I keep making adjustments, I'm going to be here forever. Let's leave it at that. Let's call that done. It's better to have something finished than it is to continue to chase perfection. I say editing the angle of the wings. Let's just make top of the stabilizer flat. So we can definitely get rid of some of the geometry on these engines because it's hidden. Um, select the faces which just are not visible at all. Oh no, that one is visible. Oh, it's a tiny bit of that face was visible. Oh, darn it. Uh-oh. Hole in the mesh. Let's just move it up. That works for me. Right, I'm going to declare this model complete now. I've deleted all of the hidden geometry as far as I know. So there are a few things that we got to do before we move on to the next phase. Well, actually, no, let's not call it complete. There are a couple of things that we need to do before we move on to the next phase of making this model. Namely, we have to make sure that there are no pentagons left. As I said earlier, pentagons are they're toxic to game engines. Game engines are going to want to see tries at worst and tries at best, quads at worst. So a way we can do that is in edit mode, we can do select faces by sides. So if we select this option, we can change this to greater than, and it's going to pick out all of the shapes which have got more than 4 vertices around them. So these are going to be the pentagons. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to cut these up into quads and triangles. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So even though these two are on a line, they are counted as 2 different edges because there's a vertex in the middle. So let's cut there. Obviously these engines are going to be a problem. So again, using the knife tool, I'm just going to turn that into quads and tries. This one's a bit easier. Let's see. Anything else selected? No. Cool. So we have now got everything down to either a quad or a try, which means, I'll tell you what it means. It means we should save, because I haven't yet. I've been going for 2 hours. So let's save this model. I'm just going to create a new folder called, I don't know, demonstration. Oh no. Oh. Let's go into the demonstration and let's call this brick, because it's a bit of a flying brick. So I'm going to save that as a Blender file. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to start unwrapping the UVs. So the UVs are how we're going to get textures onto this model. So I'll open a new instance of Blender. Come on. So UVs or UV unwrapping is, if you ever created like a cube out of a piece of paper, you know, you sort of had to create 6 squares which were connected on certain sides, and then you sort of fold it up into a cube shape, and that's how the UV unwrapping works. It's going to be trying to do, well, it's going to do the opposite of that. It's going to take your 3D object and it's going to sort of peel it back over certain edges and try and turn it into something that is flat that you can draw on. So if we take a cube, for example, we can split it up like this. So I'm going to select some faces. Now the idea here is to make sure that you're selecting faces so that there are unselected faces that join the faces, unselected edges which join the faces together in a way that makes it easy to unwrap. So I've selected these faces here. I'm going to do a Control E, and then I'm going to do Mark Seam. So these seams are how we determine how we're going to unwrap the object into like a flat plane. So I'm going to mark them as seams, and you'll see that they've now turned red. Well, they've got like a red outline on them. And that means that Blender knows that these are seam edges. So what I can do is I can open up a new window. With this little nubby thing here. So by default, this new window is just going to be another 3D viewpoint. But we can change this to UV image editor, which takes us into a 2D viewpoint. And then we can create a new image. So let's do this 256 by 256. So you always want these textures to have edges of a size that's a power of 2. So this is stuff like 128, 256, 512, 1024. And the reason for this is the way that game engines are going to be scaling these textures up and down. It's really going to be so much more efficient because of some maths reason, because the computer uses binary. It's going to be so much more efficient that if it can just use an image that is of one of these exact sizes. So we're going to say 256, which is a nice medium small texture. I'm going to call this color grid, and then we can choose a type. So this blank, this color grid, and this UV grid. So let's go with color grid, and that generates us this little texture here, which, you know, fun stuff. So the controls in here are actually basically the same as the controls out here. It's just that it's going to be working in 2D rather than 3D. We've even got a little cursor, and it's a square one or a diamond one to indicate it's 2D cursor instead of the 3D cursor, which is a circle. So if I come over here, I will select all of the faces, and then I will press U, and that gives me a menu, and I'm going to select from here Unwrap. And what this is now done is it's unwrapped the cube based on the edges that we defined as seams. So if I pick this edge up here, so actually this face here has no seams on its edges. And that means that if I select everything, you see it's the one that is not, you know, cut off from any of the other edges. So this edge here is not a seam. Sorry, let's do that. This edge here is not a seam. So these two faces are next to each other on the UV grid. So we have effectively unwrapped this cube. Gosh, it occurs to me how hard it is to describe a UV unwrapping. I could show you a suboptimal unwrap for this. So if I just select all of the edges, I'll do Control E and clear seam. And then I will just select everything and then do unwrap. Oh my God, it's actually given up. It's not even attempted it. That's quite funny, actually. If I just mark the one seam, will it do it then? Yeah, basically it's given up. It's put all of the vertices at the bottom here and it's gone, I don't know. I can't deal with this. If I select everything, mark it as a seam, now nothing is going to be connected to each other. So I'll do unwrap again, and it's arranged them like this. But actually, if we move these around, none of them are connected to each other anymore. So it's basically unwrapped each face of this cube as a completely separate image. Whereas if I go back to what it was before, so nope, Control E, so clear seam, and then I'll do the optimal unwrapping again. Oh. These are actually all joined together, so you can't split them apart in any way. So I'm using Control L again for linked. So linked vertices is the same over here as it is in here. But these are all connected together. So if I start manipulating this, it's going to affect the unwrapping it for like 3 faces instead of just for 1 face. So if we switch this bit over to, so at the moment it's showing a solid, so it's just flat shapes. If we switch the image over to texture, at the moment there's no texture, so it's just showing up white. But if we come over to this UV layout that we've got, and we change the backing image to the color grid, suddenly we've got a color grid on our object. And like each of these squares is corresponding to, you know, one of the faces on there. So whatever is in this square is on the corresponding face in the 3D view. So this square we can tell is the top here because this square contains the top of A1, and this is the top of A1. So if I move this around, ooh, we get some trippy stuff going on with the textures in here. And then if I start deforming these, we start to see texture warping, which is what we want to avoid in general. So generally speaking, our goal for UV unwrapping is to get these faces as close to the actual shape in the 3D space as possible. With a cube, it can be done perfectly. So we can perfectly unwrap a cube. With something a bit more arbitrary like our spaceship, it's not going to be perfect, but we can get it quite close. So if I switch back over to our spaceship, what we're going to want to do first is we're going to want to stop mirroring this. So we don't want our textures to be the same on both sides, because let's say we write the word, I don't know, spaceship across here. We don't want it to be mirrored here because then mirrored text is, you know, it doesn't pass, you can't read it. So we're going to apply this. Oh, we're going to exit out of edit mode into object mode, and then we're going to apply this mirror modification. And once we've applied it, we've now got all of the vertices. So if I start moving stuff around here, it's not affecting the other side anymore. But I'm actually going to undo that because I don't want to ruin this mirrored version of the file. So if in future I want to come in and I want to make a variation on this, like, I don't know, I want to extend the wings back. It's awful, but let's say I want to do that. I can't like easily revert it to being mirrored once I've unmirrored it. It's possible, it's just not easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this file with the mirror still applied, and then I'm going to save a copy. I'm going to save this as a different one. So we're going to call this brick mirrored, I guess. I forget what my normal convention is at this time. So we're going to save this as a new file. So this is now brick mirrored rather than brick. So if we apply the mirror modification here, we're not damaging our original file. And also something else that I've discovered, you don't want this like middle seam of vertices. This will itself cause some warping in your textures. So if I open up actually I'll open it up in Blender. If I open up my Thunderbird ship, so it was a ballistic NG ship, Thunderbird V2. I think it's this one, Unwrap Unmirrored. No, it's not this one. V2.2. Hey, this is the one. I called it Unflat Wing for some reason. Can you see that there is a small amount of distortion going on with the texture on the top here? So it actually comes along and it's not completely flat. There's a little bump here, and this text here is slightly bumpy, and again, it's not flat. And that's because I left this center line of vertices in, which when I really should have done is merge them over or something, but I can't do that now because this one is properly textured. So if I go back to here, I'm going to want to delete. Yeah, it's just very subtly off, unfortunately. That's just caused by this middle like edge. I mean, it's most visible here on the bottom. It's fairly, you can't really see anything. So if I come back to this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just merge these over to the side, just so we get some nice flat boxes up on the top center here. So I'm going to hide that. So some of these are actually geometry. So this line here, see, if I merge this to this, if I merge this center line to the side, I'm actually going to be damaging the shape that is going on here, because it's going up to this point and then back down to this point. Although, having said that, I'm not sure if it really needs to do that. So I can move this over. Oh, not H. So how's that look? I think I actually do prefer it with the, yeah, I think it looks better when it is just tapering up very slightly. So I'm going to leave that as it is. I was about to adjust this, move it down, but of course no mirror modifier, so I'm not going to play too hard with that. This bit's flat though, so I can move this one over. There is a bit of Z fighting going on here because this little flap here is very thin. I think in practice it's going to be fine though. We can deal with a little bit of thinness. But we definitely want to do this. This one will cause a fair bit of distortion. Yeah, so that is now question. This bit is a weird shade. Is it actually filled in properly? You know what I didn't do? I did not check the normals of this ship. So if I open the normals with, so I open this menu here with N, I can turn on normals. Here we go. So normals. So these are little arrows which are going to show which direction each face is pointing in. And the reason why these normals are important is because sometimes some game engines, oh, that's geometry that could go away as well. Sometimes game engines aren't going to render like the back of these faces. So all of these faces, they do actually have a front, so to speak. And some game engines, depending on the shader that you're using, will only render the front or the back. Well, not the back, but they will either render the front or they'll render the front and the back. And it's also going to be how we calculate lighting on this object. So before ray tracing, I mean, ray tracing is kind of becoming a thing where we can get some very realistic lighting engine going on. But before that, we sort of fake lighting by looking at, well, which direction is each face, facing? And so if they're facing the wrong way, so let's say it's facing inwards, and I can simulate that by changing these ones. So flip normals. These two are actually going to be lit up if a light source is down here at the bottom rather than up here at the top. So we do want these normals to be pointed in the correct direction. Whoops. It looks like they're all pointing outwards. We can just select everything and do make normals consistent. Probably hasn't changed anything though. So yeah, so the normals are probably fine. Actually, speaking of lighting engines, there is something else that we can do. So we can change the shading between smooth and flat. So at the moment it's in flat shading. So you can see clearly delineated edges between all of the faces. If I change this to smooth, those edges are a lot less visible. Now obviously we don't want it to look smooth because it's a spaceship, it's going to have flat edges. Um, like if I were to take, let's do a new, oh, go on. If I take a cylinder, we don't want this to be smooth because a cylinder has got like a hard edge at the top and at the bottom. Although these bits here, the bits around the edge, should be smooth because you know, a real cylinder, it only has one curved face that goes round this edge. Obviously, you know, 3D engines are limited in that they can't really render curved faces, so they just have to make do with a bunch of flat faces. So basically, we want the top bits to be flat shaded and we want the bottom bits to be smooth shaded. I mean, really, because if it's flat shaded, we capture the fact that the top is flat, but we lose the fact that the, you know, this face is actually supposed to be one face. In smooth, we capture that this face is one, you know, one surface, but we lose the fact that the top is separate. So what we can do, same way that we mark edges, so we can select edges and do Control E and then mark sharp, and these edges will show up blue rather than red. So Control E, mark sharp. So at the moment that's not doing anything, but if we come over here, and I think we need to do which one is it? You know what? I don't actually remember. Or is it light automatic smooth actually? 1 second. I'm going to look it up. Okay, so I need to turn on a setting called Autosmooth, which is in the Geometry tab. You told me just before I looked it up. Yeah, so it's over here in this Data tab apparently. So Autosmooth. And we'll just set the angle to, we'll just leave the angle on default because what we really care about is having these sharp edges actually recognized as sharp. And yeah, so I'm pretty sure this does actually work when you're exporting the object, at least if you're exporting it as FBX, it will update the normals so that these normals have got smooth shading and the top normal has got flat shading. That's anecdotal, I haven't actually double checked, but it seems to work when I imported another ship into Blender, not Blender, into Unity. So if I go back to the ship, let's define some hard edges for this thing. We'll turn on Auto Smooth. Well, that's actually that's a pretty good selection already. Actually, no, we want the engines to be smooth. Let's just set this to an arbitrary high thing. Let's just set it to 90. And then we're coming and we'll manually set. No, we're not weight painting. No, thank you. Edit mode, please. So let's pick some edges to be hard. Obviously we want this one around the sort of prongs to be hard. So Control E, mark sharp. I should have done this before getting rid of the mirror modifier. Oh well. Mark sharp. I'm thinking wings, obviously. We'll follow on the sort of wing edge that we've got here. So we'll mark this one as sharp. Oh, selected the wrong edge here. This is a fairly hard edge, so this one will be sharp. Again, we'll do the wings. I want to bring this edge up here to be sharp. Obviously where's the main engine gone? Obviously we want this bit round the edge of the engines to be sharp. It's basically a cylinder. Oh hey, look, there's some geometry that we could get rid of. Probably have the wings edges or connectors being sharp. Oh, ah yes, the underside of this overhang. Oh, Yeah, that looks good to me. Oh, hang on, there's something weird going on with the top fin. Is there? Perhaps that should be... No, it shouldn't be. I think in a real aircraft that would be curved anyway. Okay. Oh, I know what I want to do. That one. And that one. Yeah, cool. So now we've got this cut out nice and... now we've got the edges that we want sharp, marked as sharp. Let's go... Did I really delete that face? Well, I'm not very clever, am I? Whoops. Crisis averted. It's always nice when you just see a random gap in your geometry. Cool. So let's do some UV unwrapping on something that isn't a cube. So again, I'm dragging over a new window. I'm going to pick UV image editor and I'm going to create a new texture. So I don't know how big I want to make this. Let's start with 256 and see where we go from there. And we're going to do a color grid. So let's get in close to this. Oh dear. Let's get in close to this model and see where we should start cutting the edges of the UVs. So places that make sense to cut, hard edges, like if two edges are quite close together, if two edges like lead into each other. Is the color grid included with Blender? It is, yeah. So by default, you can generate one of three types, color grid and UV grid. So UV grid looks like this. So it's colored itself. It's just I prefer the color grid because you can see it actually goes down to pixel level textures. So this is 1 pixel just here, and then that's 1 pixel. So that when you get the color grid actually on this model, you can actually see how big a pixel is, which is good if you're doing this sort of low poly, quite pixelated style, because you want to see exactly how big each pixel is. Yeah, so candidates for edges to mark as seams are generally going to be, I mean, a good starting point would be these sort of sharp edges that we've determined. I'm going to turn off the normals because they're distracting. So anywhere where there's like a hard angle between two edges, that's a good candidate. Yeah, God. That's a good candidate for a seam because if it's a hard edge, it's going to be harder to see that the two textures are not perfectly flowing into each other. Whereas like this edge here, if you had one texture here and then a different texture here, it would be really obvious because they're so close together. I mean, like they're basically on the same plane almost. So let's pick out, well, first of all, let's just see what it attempts to do if I unwrap it. So I'll switch over to texture mode, switch to color grid. So without marking any seams, it has had such a bad day that it's just put 1 pixel on the entirety of the spaceship. And then the engines have got some other things going on, which are these shapes here. But even then, the engines, look how distorted the texture is on the engine. I mean, that bit's okay, surprisingly so. But up here, no. no, that's not happening. So that is going to be the benefit of actually like defining some seams. So let's pick out like the tail fin. So I'm going to separate the tail fin from the rest of the body. I'm going to use the number pad point key again to center my camera. So I'm going to do mark seam, select everything again and unwrap. So instantly it's tried to do a completely different unwrap. This actually looks kind of cool on its own, but it's super distorted still. But the main thing that we should see, oh, hang on, is that this is probably the fin, isn't it? Yeah. So if I move this around, we're seeing that the texture on the fin is the only bit that is changing, because we have separated that from the main bulk of the model. So if I select this thing here, this is the texture that has been applied to the main body of the spaceship. So it makes sense to like split out things which we want to have separate textures for. So like this whole air intake cover leading into the wing, this is probably a good thing to split out onto its own. So I'm going to grab these edges. I'm actually going to switch back to solid because it's easier to see what I'm highlighting. So let's grab the top part. We'll mark that as a seam. Again, grab the top part, mark it as a seam. Now if we unwrap, we will actually see the texture on the wings is now pretty much undistorted. There's going to be a little bit of distortion because you can't really flatten this perfectly, but you can flatten it pretty close. And you're seeing, because you can see the individual pixels, you can see how distorted the pixels are. Like there's a little bit going on with the T. It's a little bit warped, but it's barely noticeable. And we want to just go ahead and do this for the rest of the model. So let's put it back into solid. Unfortunately, because I've marked these edges as sharp, I can't see them coming up as what's the word? Seams. I can't see them being highlighted as seams because they'd be highlighted red, but the red is being overridden by the blue. I don't know if there's a way of turning that off. User preferences maybe? Interface. There might be an option, but probably best if I just don't muck about with it for now. I'll sod it. I'm going to look it up. So Blender, don't show sharp edges. Oh. I don't think I'm searching for the correct options. Oh well. We'll just have to rely on it unwrapping correctly. And this is in N. Display. Ah, there we go. So I've turned off the set. So this is in the main menu, which you toggle with N. And then you can select whether it shows sharp. You can also select seams, but I do want to see seams at the moment. Cool. I knew there was an option. So let's just continue picking out edges, which are nice hard edges that we want to cut out. I think we'll have the like canopy of the cockpit finish at this point here. So I'm going to set that as the seam. I'll have a separate texture for the air intakes. Is that too small? Now we can have that connected to this sort of top shape here. I think because this is nice and flat at the top, we can just cut out this entire section, make it one texture. But it might be good to be able to connect. We'll cut it out like this for now. Mark seam. And then we can have the underside all as one. Yeah, honestly, we can keep most of the underside as one like texture. Let's just hide these once again. Yeah, there's no reason why this can't all be basically one texture. Although we will need to cut out, let's cut out the inside of these fins. So although that could be a seam, I don't want like this little front bit to be its own, unconnected texture. So I am going to connect that to here. As long as the connection point is a single edge, it's gonna unwrap okay. The problem comes when you've got faces that are connected by like multiple edges, like here. But the problem isn't going to be very pronounced because they are quite flat against each other. So E mark seam. So I control E mark seam. And then like this whole underside section, we could just cut it out. Nope. We'll just separate the wings. Yeah. Do we want the wings to be connected to this sort of overhang? Like we could totally do that. The problem is going to be, this is going to make a very wide shape, and it might be more efficient if we like do this here. And then we can have these shapes the two wings side by side, and it's going to take up less space because you sort of slot them in next to each other. I think in the main thing, this is all that we need. So I'm going to give this another unwrap. So select everything, unwrap. Already this is looking a lot better, a lot less distorted. Let's switch over to texture. So ignoring the engines, because we haven't done the engines yet. Things are looking pretty good up here. I'm not seeing a ton of distortion. Like that B looks fairly sensible. There's a little bit going on with that one, but it's very, very subtle. And that could just literally be the, viewpoints, because they are on different planes. So yeah, that's unwrapped quite nicely. Oh, also, when you unwrap, it's always going to move these around. So it's going to try and fit them in as best as it can. It's not actually going to be the best that is possible. You will always have to come in here and manually edit it, but it's going to try its hardest. Bless it. So let's do the engines. So these are fairly simple shapes. I'm going to just hide. So again, makes sense to split this wing out. Mark seam. And again, so this is like the danger zone. This is where the distortion is happening because we've got a bunch of faces which are connected on multiple edges. I'm going to cut the top here because this is nearly entirely covered by the body of the ship. So mark that as a seam. Same on here. Oh no, I need to extrude these two faces like I did over on the other side. There we go. Okay. It's okay that it's distorted because we're going to unwrap it again anyway. So we'll mark those ones as seams at the top again because the top's going to be mostly hidden. And I think probably the most sensible thing is just to grab this entire section around here. Circles are a pain. It's like all of our maps of the world are heavily distorted because you can't flatten a sphere. They don't like it very much. So we're going to mark that as a seam. Now if we unwrap these ones, oh no, we've still got some serious distortion going on. Oh, because I didn't do this. Mark seam, okay. So that looks a lot less distorted. Oh, the fins are distorted still. So let's have a look at what. Oh, so I think in vertex mode, no, face mode. Yes, so face mode. When you have defined seams, Control L changes slightly. It's not going to pick every face that is like connected by geometry anymore. It's going to select all of the faces that are connected. Well, A by geometry and then by the limited by the seams. So it's not going to go over the seam edges that we've defined. And we can see over here what it's tried to done is what it's tried to do is it's flattened this sort of shape. So it's sort of split the edges out. So it's taking this point here and pulled it out here and this point out here, pulled it out there. So what we need to do is we need to just give it one more edge that we're going to cut, and we'll do the front edge because you're not going to see the front edge if your camera is behind the ship. You're flying it like a Star Fox game. You're not going to see the front of this very often. So we're going to mark that one as a seam, even though that feels a little bit counterintuitive. Well, actually, we should mark these bits here as a seam as well. Again, we don't want faces connected at multiple points, really. There we go. We've got a much less distorted texture going on here now, with the payoff being that if you look at the front, there is going to be a seam here. Obviously, we won't have red and green next to each other, or yellow and green next to each other in the actual texture, but it will be something we have to work around. Oh. So let's just unhide everything and let's fix this one up here. Again, I'm going to pick the front and then these two side ones, mark seam, select everything, unwrap. There we go, a lot less distorted. So what we can also do is over here we can change the view. There is an option to show the amount of distortion. Oh. That wasn't what I wanted. Oh, weird. I've never used this setting before. It's doing something. There's definitely a setting here that lets you see the amount of distortion in each of the faces. I don't know where it is because I don't use it. I was just going to show it off for completeness sake, but is it just along here somewhere? No, No, I don't know. I'm not sure. We don't really need it. We can just eyeball it, and it looks, you know, eyeballing it, it looks like there's not a ton of distortion going on. There is a bit here, I suppose. Could we potentially... Probably the most sensible thing would just be to cut out the bottom of these wings. Mark those as seams. There, I think that's a bit better. Yeah, that's definitely better. But I definitely think that we've minimized the amount of distortion here now. There is a bit going on here. And it's happening because... Is that distortion, or is it just... So it's this bit here. Right, okay. That should be a seam. I just didn't do it properly. Yeah, okay, so let's unwrap again. There we go, that's better. Cool. So now the next thing to do is to come in here and basically optimize this, because it is far from optimized. Now, I normally do this by hand, but I have just noticed we have a pack islands thing. I'm just wondering whether this is going to automatically do for me what I normally have to do manually. Well, that's not what I expected at all. Why did you do that? Oh, for God. It's still not particularly efficient, to be honest. We got all this space up here. We could do better. We can do better. So this is the underside. So this is roughly what the size of the pixels is going to be. So we've got to ask ourselves, do we want smaller pixels than this? I think I do, actually. I tend to have a higher resolution than this. So I'm actually going to go here. I'm going to generate a new color grid. This one is going to be 512. So I'm just going to call this CG 512. That'll do. I picked the wrong type. Oh no. Let's delete that. CG, maybe it will save over. So I want color grid, not UV grid. There we go. So the pixels are a lot smaller now. So if we directly compare the two, oh, so this is color grid, big pixels. So this is color grid 256 essentially, and then color grid 512, much smaller pixels. I mean, still like visible pixels, but you know, that's kind of what the aesthetic that I work in tends to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to straighten out these engine bits. So at the moment they're slightly distorted. It's going to be slightly more accurate, slightly less warping in here, but I think we're probably safe to just go ahead and neaten it up so it's just easier to work with in Photoshop or whatever. So I'm going to select, I'm going to get that out of the way actually. I'm going to select these vertices here, and I'm going to do scale X, so this is horizontal, and I'm going to hit 0, and that's just lined them all up on the x-axis, so that they're no longer sort of out of line. So scale X 0, and again scale X 0, oh, scale X 0. And we're going to do the same thing with the vertices in the Y direction. So scale Y and then 0. don't think we're in Vertex Snap. No, we're not. We're in Increment Snap, so just change that to Vertex. Scale Y0. Cool. We'll just come in and we'll just make these roughly the same height. Again, it's not going to be exact, but it doesn't really have to be. Cool. So that's going to be a lot easier to work with because we can just start drawing straight lines if we want to have like a band that goes around the whole engine. We can just have a straight line in our image editor, whereas this one we'd have to like start creating a subtly curved line. Now, is there a tool to do this automatically? I think there might be. Weld align. Here we go. So if we do straighten X, nope. Align X? Oh no. Oh, I see. So I think what it's actually going to do is if I do this and then do UV align straighten X. I don't know what that's done at all. Align X. No. So it looks like it's not actually super smart about it. No, okay, so it's best if we just continue doing it manually. So we'll select these vertices, scale X0. Again, I'm going to hide those. I'm going to hide those. You can't. I mean, you can select edge loops in here if you click on the edges. There is no edge select like mode, so in here I'm selecting edges, whereas I think in here I can still only select vertices. Oh no, I can select edges. I tell a lie. But I think we still have to see then this edge select has not done quite what I want it to, unfortunately. There might actually be a plugin that does this sort of thing automatically. I will have to look that up. I'm sure I've seen that someone's done it automatically, but then I always do it manually because for some reason I thought it was less effort than looking up how you do it. I never claimed to be sensible. And we're just going to make sure that this thing is the same size as the one up there, because that will just make it easier when we're doing the editing. So I'm going to move the X so it's aligned with that. Oh. Cool. And we'll just make it roughly the same height. Again, can we just hide that? Oh, yeah, roughly the same size. Let's rotate this around. We'll do it 180. Put it next to the other one. Oh, look, it's significantly taller. Oops. That's okay. We'll just do scale Y. Make it roughly the same size. Scale Y. There we go. Then just got those engines in a nice side-by-side configuration. We'll put these in the corner. And then I'm going to hit the P key. And that's going to pin all of the vertices. Can you see that they've turned a bit bigger? What that means is if I come over here and I select unwrap again, it won't move them, which is super useful. Less useful is the fact that it will overlap other vertices, other islands with them. But I think if I do this and then do pack islands, no, okay, it does it even with pinned. Oh well, cool. Where's the big engine? Here it is. Let's just do a similar thing with the big engine. And I'm not going to be editing many of the other UVs. It's just with these cylindrical objects, it saves you so much pain when you're actually doing the texturing in your image editor to just have these aligned. And the amount of warping that actually occurs on the model itself is basically none. So, or at least it's not noticeable to me. I'd rather take the time to do this and then have an easier time when making the texture. So scale. Oh, slight exception. I'm going to leave that as it is default by default. Good tip on the edge loop though. When it does work, it does, it is very helpful. It's just that it doesn't always work. Scale X. Cool. And once again, oops. Let's just make all of these segments roughly the same height. I think these center bits have ended up being a bit taller, but that's okay. Again, oh, doing this by eye. Cool. And I'm going to take this, I'm going to move it over here. So when you're doing texturing, it is helpful to have logically similar things next to each other. It saves your brain some effort when you come to texturing it. Oh, I've just noticed that this one is not symmetrical. Although it could just be because I've hidden some things. Let me unhide everything. Yeah, okay, it's just because I hid some things. So this bottom one, I'm going to leave as it is. Like I said, I'm only editing these. Let me just pin that. I'm only editing these cylindrical things because they are so much of a pain to actually draw on. Let's just move the end of the cylinders up here as well. There's the other small one. I know it's the other small one because I remember drawing that pattern. And where's the big one? There it is. Let's just move all this other stuff out of the way. There we go. Pin those. And in fact, I'm going to make them bigger because I made these bits slightly bigger. So in fact, because these are the back, and you're probably going to be looking at the back, just make them even bigger. Oh, they should have similar pixel sizes. Oh, those are way smaller. Okay. Oh, that's because I'm scaling the wrong thing. Oh no, those pixels are roughly the same size. Let me recenter my view. Yeah, they're roughly the same. Okay, that's fine. This one is smaller though. Just scale it up until the pixels are roughly equivalent. Oh, good enough, I guess. Cool. Okay. So in terms of like UV real estate, the bits that are going to be seen most should get more pixels generally. And the bits that are going to be seen the least, well, least pixels. I'm going to keep things as like consistent as possible here, just for simplicity's sake. Like if you're doing something high res, you'd probably want this bit and this bit to be very high pixel density, so very high resolution. And then perhaps this bit under here would be a lower resolution just to save space on your texture thing. But because the pixels are actually visible, I think it probably makes more sense to just keep everything as close together as possible. So first of all, I'm noticing the pixels are aligned at an angle on the wings. And that's, is it convenient? Well, okay, the pixels are aligned with like the rear edge. And you've got to ask yourself, where am I going to want straight lines to be? Because when you're working with like pixely textures, straight lines that are not, you know, on the X or Y plane in the image are going to be a bit jaggedy. There's going to be aliasing. So you've got to ask yourself, which lines do you want to be nice and smooth? And I think those are actually good choices. I was about to change it, but having this line here that follows the back half of the wing is probably a nice choice. Yeah. So I'm actually going to leave those the same orientation that they are. So that's this wing. Oh, this one's different though. That's not aligned. So that's probably this wing. Yeah. So this is the back of the wing. So if I rotate this whole shape so that the top edge is horizontal, or as close as I can make it, we should see, yeah, so this line is now parallel with the back of the wing. So this is the orientation that I'm going to use for the wings. So I'm going to keep these close together, maybe move them over here. And I'm going to keep them close to the underside of the wings as well. So let's grab this. So this one is already aligned with it's already got the horizontal parallel to the back of the wing, so that's good. Here's the other one, I think. Yep. And this one doesn't, so let's rotate it. Okay. And again, we'll put it right next to the other one, so logically similar things are kept in the same place. And I'll just try and link this up with the top halves. So I want the top half and the bottom half of the same wing to be aligned with each other. So which wing is this the top half for? That wing. So this is the left wing, and what wing is this the underside for? Right wing. So I'm actually going to rotate this around 180. So now these top ones are both the same wing, hopefully. Oh, so hopefully, yep, okay. And these two bottom ones are the same wing. The only problem with this configuration is that there is some wasted space in the middle here. Yeah, so this is probably the part of the process that I am like most embarrassed about showing off, because my UV maps are not super efficient. If you've ever seen like a professional UV or like a professional texture, somehow they manage to just use every single pixel, and I don't know how they do it. Like I opened up the like dev tools for XCOM 2, and if you look in there, there's the gun textures, and they just are like perfectly aligned to fill this entire square texture, and it's just like, how did you do that? How did you not waste space? But yeah, like I could align these so they're all square and line up with the edges of this, but then we'd have massive amounts of distortion over here. So these are going to be fairly amateurish textures. So can we fit that in here? No. I might just put this over here. No. See, this is the problem. I'm going to hide this off there for now. So we've got the underside. I'm quite happy with the underside just being down in the corner. I'll just move it out slightly so we don't get overlap. So it doesn't like bleed out over into the edges. So what is this? Ah, the fin. Okay. So where do I want this fin? Probably near the top. Where's the... So this is the top bit, I think. Yeah, so let's put the fin near that. So let's have the top here. We'll put the fin... I always hate it when it's very slightly skew-if. It's just like, could you not align one of these edges? There we go. So this is probably the top of one of the wings. Yes, this is the top of one of the wings. Let's grab the top of the other wing. Sorry, not wing, struts or whatever you call them. Yep. Again, I'm putting logically related things next to each other, so it's easier to remember what each thing represents. And these are at the... Do I want to make them bigger? I could get extra pixel density if I made it a little bit bigger, just to fill this space. So what's this here? I know, that's the underside of the hood, or the flap, or whatever. Yeah, okay. So we'll put that here, near the bottom. Does that make sense? In fact, that literally glues in, doesn't it? There we go. This is the inside of one of the fins. Where's the other inside? Oh, there it is. It's very hard to see when they're overlapping. Let's go back to the front. Right, so where do we want the horizontal to be? Probably horizontal with world space. So let's rotate this. Oh, wrong one. That's roughly horizontal, isn't it? Or at least close enough. So let's do the same thing here. Cool. And actually, because those are related to these, let's move them up here. So which top is this island? Oh, yep. Cool. Okay, so I've put the logically related bits next to each other. And we'll do the same with this one. I mean, there's some overlap at the moment, but we'll fix that in a sec. might be more efficient if we move this down. There we go. Cool. What else have we got to do? We've got to do these little wings. That's one of them here. Oh, it's the underside of one of them. No. Oh, that's the engine wing. So I'm going to move this up with the engine stuff. I'm going to have it so that the center line is vertical. Yeah, okay. It fits better if I make this, if I rotate it 90 degrees. So there. Okay, so this is one of the wings. Yes, that's the underside of one of the wings. One of the front wings. Oh, hang on, the top side is connected. Okay. So there is no separate top side island. So where's the other one? Oh, here it is. So let's, oh, it's a good place to put them actually. And let's just align them so that we get some nice angles on the horizontal. Yeah, so we'll have this edge aligned. Cool. So I think we've got everything like logically grouped now. So it's just a case of trying to fit it in as big as possible to make as efficient use of the space as we can. I think this is going to be the troublesome part. In fact, perhaps it's better off if I do this. No, that's not. It's not better off. I mean, that's more ideal, but I don't want to. I mean, I could just do this. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. You do want to leave a little margin between each island, because the UVs do tend to bleed over a little bit. That is the top fin. The top fin does fit better there, even if it isn't logically related. Oh, wrong button. It's downside of having H right next to G, because G is moving and H is hide. Ah, it doesn't quite fit. That's so annoying. I could just move this one over here, though. I put the fin in here, rotate it again. This is definitely more of an art than a science. Sod it, I'm just going to have them. Do I dare have them not next to the logical one to have them next to? Will that be more confusing than it's worth? But it's so much more efficient because I can tuck them in together like this. problem is that corresponds to that and that corresponds to that. I suppose as long as I remember that that's how it works, it's going to be fine. Oh, I don't have anywhere for this, for the canopy now. Unless I rotate, unless I rotate this entire group, move it down. Nope. Just an inefficient use of space here. What is the pixel density of the engines compared to the body? Oh, about the same. This is like a puzzle game, really. I don't need massive margins, so I can move that down here. This one is only constrained a bit. So I move this in here. Let's see how much space we've got to work with. If I move this bit up, so oh, oh, it's so inefficient. You know what? It's good enough. Like I said, it's not going to be perfect. I could sit here trying to perfect this for hours, but or I could actually just get on and do some texturing. Okay, so I'm going to call that done. I'm not surprised. Cool. So let's get this into our image editor of choice. That's annoying. The fact that this line is not aligned with the center of the fin, even though it matters not at all. Cool. Actually, no, there's a step that we're going to want to do before we load it up. We want to export the UVs as an image. So the UVs are all of these vertices that have been flattened out here. It's called UVs because the coordinate system in here is U and V, I think. Well, it's U and V to differentiate it from the X, Y, and Z going on in here. So we want to export this layout so that we know where to draw our textures in our image editor. So the way we're going to do that is, I think we have to select it all and do UV and then export UV layout. And then, so this is our working directory. We're going to call this, I don't think it's very bricky anymore. Now we've got the wings on it. We should give it a cooler name, like Viper or something. But let's just call it brick. That's like our project name. And then we can call it something else when we export it. So we're going to call this brick UV. Oh, I've hit caps again. And we're going to set the size to the same size as the image that we were working with. So we want it the same resolution. And we're going to take the fill opacity down to 0. This is the most annoying thing. I really wish it would default to 0. And I'll get into that, why that is useful in a sec. So generally speaking, when you're doing textures for things, you want to work at a higher resolution than you're actually going to export. So if you're planning on your texture being 1024 by 1024, your working texture should probably be something like 498 by 498. The problem is if you're doing sort of pixely textures like I'm doing, when you come to downscale it at the end, you don't really have that much control over what individual pixels look like. If you want to have like visible pixels on your textures, I think it's more useful to work at that exact resolution. It's like you wouldn't create pixel art by drawing something high res and then downscaling it. You draw it as the pixel art. Am I right? I think a lot of people would argue I'm wrong, but it's the way that I work. So yeah, I'm going to export this UV layout at the same resolution as the color grid I was working with, fill opacity 0. And I'll just show you what that file looks like. 3D modeling, demonstration. So this is what it's going to export for us. So it's just taken all of the edges and turned it into a transparent image file. But before we go into our image editor, there is one more thing that we can do to make this look a lot better once we're working on the texture. And what we're going to do is we're going to bake an ambient occlusion map. So this is perhaps not the best idea if you're going to be using a like engine with a powerful shader. If you want to have real-time ambient occlusion, perhaps you would skip this step. But for this sort of low poly, slightly pixely style, I want to bake the ambient occlusion directly into the texture. So it's there. The lighting engine doesn't have to do any work. It's just part of the texture. So what I can do is I can take this and I can bake an ambient occlusion map in Blender, and then I'll add that to my to the texture that I start painting on. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to create a material for our object. So this is the material tab. So just hit new. I'm going to call this AO matte. I'm going to change the color to be perfectly white, and I'm going to change the intensity to be 100 in the diffuse. So RGB all at 1, so perfectly white, and then intensity to 1. Then I'm going to do, can I remember where I have to click? So I think there's a button in here that lets you render a AO map. Here we go, bake mode, ambient occlusion. So if I bake that now, so this is a very rough ambient occlusion map. If you don't know what ambient occlusion is it's basically looking for each point on this texture, how much light am I receiving? Or how exposed am I to like the outside world? So these bits which are really enclosed, these have got really dark shadows in the AO map, whereas something which is just like flat, well, it's nice and light. Obviously, this is really grainy and really ugly, but we will fix that. And you can see the edges that we marked as sharp earlier have got sharp edges on this AO map, and then the edges that we left as smooth have not got sharp edges. So that's another reason to do the auto smoothing sharp edges thing. So the option that we need to change is sampling. It's in here somewhere, I think. Is it shading? No. There's a tab for sampling here. Oh, hang on. Gather. Is that it? There's a samples option there, but I don't think that is. Right, looking it up. Oh, I thought I'd remembered how to do the AO map, but I guess not. Oh, it's gather in here, so it is that one. How do I turn that on? Oh, we enable ambient occlusion. That's how we do it. Cool. So now we can set the samples. So at the moment, samples are 5. If we set that higher, let's go 24. And we'll bake the map again. So down here so we want to turn on ambient occlusion in this worlds tab, and then set the samples to some value. And then in the render tab, the first one, we want to come down to bake, change the bake mode to ambient occlusion, and then just hit bake. You see, it's a lot smoother this time. So we have got a lot less of the noise. I mean, it's still not perfect, but we will go into like our image editor and we'll tidy up like these rough edges. But that is largely what I'd expect to see. We've got some nice baked in shadows going on around here. Again, these are because it is like visible pixels. We've got this sort of artifacting here. We'll just go into the image editor and we'll tidy that up. So let's just set it to a high number of samples. So 128, and we'll let that bake. This is going to take a while, unfortunately. It's quite cool that you can watch it going. In retrospect, 24 samples probably would have been good enough, but this is what I've used in all of my previous projects. I set it to 128. So I do like a test. I do a test one on 24, and then if that looks good, I'll do the actual one on 128. It is faster than painting and shading by hand. That's what I did in my first. That's what I did on my first models. I can actually open one and see if I can find my very first spaceship. Oh, I actually think it is in program files. No, it's not program files. What am I talking about? It's in pictures. Gravity Rush ships. Thunderbird. Here we go. Single engine. Uh-oh. What is that? Oh, see, this is my first ever one. I tried to use the quad view mode, and I had an image set up where I was trying to get it aligned as closely as possible. So I'm guessing this is... What is up with the normals? Oh no, that's fine. That's fine. Here we go. So this is my first ship that I actually rendered with textures. So that's like the finished texture over here. And yeah, I did all of the like shading myself, and it doesn't look as good as the ambient occlusion that you can render um, using Blender. Is it done? Oh, it is. It's done. Cool. it's just you sort of have to make guesses that you don't have to do if you've got ambient occlusion set up. Um, yeah. So actually, this one, I never actually unmirrored this one, so it's still in mirror mode. And because of that, I wasn't able to put any text on the side of this ship because it would be mirrored on the other side and be unreadable. So I sort of learnt that lesson in my subsequent ships. Did I do that for Excel? No, again, I think this one is, yeah, this one's still mirrored, so I hadn't learnt at this point. I think my third one was Katzbalger, and by then I had definitely learnt how to do it. Ships, Katzbalger. Oh, I mean, obviously this one is not mirrored. You can kind of tell by the giant effing railgun, which is just on one side of it. But yeah, so this is the first one that has like actual text on it because I realized I should probably unmirror this. I still like that. I love how stupid it is just to have a giant railgun on one side and one side only. I do this a lot. I don't know why. I just really like having some sort of radiator thing on the bottom of my hulls. Anyway, cool. So we've got this AO map, and what we're going to do is we're going to save this as an image. So we're going to call this one brick AO. Cool. So now we have everything that we need to open this in our image editor. So I'm going to be using Photoshop for this one. I'm going to close down Clip Studio. That is so much sleeker, but I wanted to make my brick. So you don't have to use Photoshop. Frankly, screw Adobe and their stupid business practices. I like Photoshop mostly for its text tools. So you can have text along a path and stuff like that. Whereas stuff like Clip Studio Paint, it's more directly related to art and drawing. So it's fine if you just want to paint the textures, but if you want to get the library with text, it's not ideal. I think if you used a combination of something like Clip Studio Paint and then GIMP, I think GIMP's got decent text tools. That would be a good like low cost alternative to Photoshop. Or I mean, you could just do what most people do with Photoshop, which I won't mention, but I think you know what I'm talking about. Oh, yeah, okay, Photoshop. Okay, I think it's booting up its Yep, it's still loading. Here we go. Oh look, textures. Um, so let's open. So I saved it in 3D modeling demonstration. Let's open the UV layout. Cool. And oh, come on. Let's open the ambient occlusion map. And we're going to copy this into the same file as the UV layout. Let's put it below the UVs so we can see what we're working with. Cool. So this is our ship texture. This is going to basically be our basis for all of the textures that we're going to paint. Why are you whistling innocently? That just makes me more suspicious. So I am going to first of all, I'm going to put down a base. I'm going to put down a base color. So I'm going to put down a nice dark grey. Oh. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this AO layer. In fact, I'm going to label it AO. I'm going to label this one UV. Oh, wink wink, say no more. I'm going to call this base. I'm going to go to the AO and I'm going to change the blending mode to multiply. So this is now going to overlay all of these pre-baked shadows onto whatever we paint underneath. And in fact, I'm going to make a folder for hull. I'm going to put the base in the hull folder. Okay, so if I then take off UVs, turn off the UVs, I'll save this. First, I'll save it as a Photoshop file. So I'm going to just call this brick texture. And then I will save it as a PNG, a PNG. I'm going to call this diffuse because it's going to be a diffuse texture, meaning this is just the basic sort of colors that we're going to be putting onto the ship. Cool. And if we just head back over to Blender, what we're going to do is we're going to apply this image file as a material on here. So we're going to change this to material mode. We're going to come over here. We're going to create a new material. We're going to call this one brick matte. And we are going to add a texture to it. So we're going to create a new texture. We're going to call this one diffuse. And we're going to open our image file. So we're going to grab brick diffuse. Cool. So now the brick material is using the brick diffuse texture, which is being shown just here. And what we're going to want to do is, at the moment, it's showing up completely black because there are no light sources in the scene. This art style doesn't really need shadows. You could use like hard shadows in like Wind Waker if you wanted, but you don't really need to. So at least while I'm working, I'm just going to come down here and go to shadow, and I'm going to select, no, where is it? I'm looking for the shadeless button. Here it is. So it's in shade. Oh, it's in shading. I'm just going to click shadeless, and I'm going to make sure that this is using the texture. So assign that texture. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's worked. So now we can see the pre-baked shadows, but we're also seeing this base color that we have basically plonked down. So what I did is I went into edit mode, I selected all the vertices, selected the material that I wanted to switch to, and then I clicked assign. Okay, so if I turn shadeless off, it will turn black again because there are no light sources, but we don't need any light sources. And I'm actually going to just move that over because I don't really need the UV open much at the moment. I'm not going to close it because I will be going back to it every now and again, but I don't need it. So this is a cool sort of base to work with. So we can head back over to Photoshop, turn the UVs on. What I like to do is I like to turn the opacity down on the UVs so that they're not as imposing on the texture. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick out some of these panels which I'm going to change. So, well, I'm going to change them into like paneling. So like this is like the underside of the car where you've got all of the wires and all the like crankshaft and stuff. And I'm going to pick some panels which are going to be like the shell of your car. So in this, to use this as an example, this is the underside, this is the base, this is the hull, and then these bits I have determined are panels. It's an arbitrary distinction, but I like to have like a mixture of panels and then raw machinery. So I'm going to turn AO off so it's easier to see these UV layouts. And I'm going to, oh, I don't want to select that one. I'm going to use the Magic Wands tool. I'll turn the tolerance up a bit. Nope. too much. I'm just going to pick out, this is the wrong, okay, we want that mode. Yeah. So I'm just going to pick out some of these shapes which I want to be panels. So I want the top bit here, I want that to be a panel. I want the underside of this wing to be a panel. I want the whole of this wing and the underside to be a panel. But I think like this section here, this could be all hull raw machinery stuff. This bit in here, I definitely want to be raw machinery. Okay, so the fin should be a panel too. So this is where like having stuff logically grouped together is helpful, because then it makes selecting easier. Actually, no, I recently started doing it a different way. Instead of selecting individual like blocks, I'm going to select the outside. Then I'm going to do select inverse. And then I'm going to deselect. Is this one deselect? Subtract, yeah. And I'm going to subtract the ones which are hull. So the bottom is hull. So let's delete this. That is also the underside. That's the underside of the flap area. So we'll deselect that. The inside of these fins, I want to be hull. That's the cockpit, so I want that to be there. Oh, the engines are definitely hull. We don't want painting on the engines. Cool. What's that? That is the fin on the engine. I kind of want that to be hull as well. So big wings, top of little wings. Oh, I want... No, that's the top of the little wings. That's the bottom of the little wings. Cockpit and tail fin. So this is all that we want to be like panels. If I were just to fill this selection in now, we're right up against the edge of this UV, which means it's quite likely that we would see like the edges of where the panels are. So what I'm going to do is, so I've got a keyboard shortcut, but I'm going to show you the manual way of doing it. Modify, expand, and we're going to expand by 2 pixels. Let's do one more. Let's do select, modify, expand, 1 more pixel. Cool. And some of these have bled into each other, but that's completely fine. So now if we come in with a paint tool, I'm going to make a group for panels. I'm actually going to make another group for diffuse. Put panels in there, put the hull in there. Oh, I want the panels in front of the hull. And then in a new layer in panels, I'm going to take the paint bucket tool. I'm going to paint in a medium grey. So these are all of the surfaces that I've determined are panels. I'm making air quotes so you can't see. And the effect of this is going to be, if I turn off the UVs and turn back on the AO, and then I save it as another PNG. Yep. We come back over here. So I don't have to like set this texture up again. What I can do is just go on the texture panel. I can just, so it's got the file here. If I just hit refresh, it will now load in the updated version of the texture. So I've basically just picked out some surfaces which are going to be, these are going to have like liveries. Is it livery or livery? I don't know. These are going to have like decoration on, and then the underside is going to be like raw machinery. Again, shadows need some work. What I usually do with the AO is I apply a Gaussian blur to it. Convert to smart object, and I do filter, blur, Gaussian. We just soften things off a bit. Let's see what this looks like. I changed it to a smart object because that allows me to undo the Gaussian blur afterwards. If I just did it as like a normal layer, that would be a non-reversible operation, and I would never get back the non-blurred version. But by converting it to a smart object, I can undo the Gaussian blur at any time, and which is something that I might want to do. Right, refresh it again. So we've just sort of smoothed everything off a bit. It does look, the edges do look a bit softer now, but I think that's fine for what we're going for. Even these really harsh bits in here look a lot better now. I was going to do some like manual reconstructive surgery on this bit, but I actually might just leave that. That doesn't look too bad. Cool. So turn UV on, AO off. You don't want to work with AO on because when you're doing like color picking, so I've got a brush. This is a pencil, but if I change to brush, I can do color picking on here. But if I have AO on, I'm going to be picking colors which have been affected by the shadows. And when I'm just painting directly onto like the panels, I don't want that to happen. So I work with AO off. That's also why it's useful to have UV with like a fill opacity of 0. If this is 0.25, it's going to be darker inside of these like boxes here. And that means that every time you do a color pick like this, it's going to be like 25% darker than it should be. And that really annoyed me the first time that I tried to do this texturing. So, oh, okay, so it's 6 o'clock. I've been going for 4 hours. I might call it here today and come back at 2 p.m. tomorrow. I don't want these streams to be super marathon-y. But I think this is probably a good place to leave off today because we've got a texture going on. Like, we've basically done the 3D bit and now we're ready to do the 2D bit. Yep, I've made an executive decision. I'm going to end it here. I normally do my streams 4 hours from 2 to 6, so that's fine. Yeah, so I hope that you have found this useful. It sounds like I've only just gotten onto one of the bits that you'll actually be new to, but if you come back tomorrow, we'll do some cool painting stuff. And I'm actually kind of pleased with how this came out. Like, I was really worried at one point, but it looks a lot less bricky now that it's got wings on it. Yeah, we'll come back and we'll go over turning this into something like, I don't know. Oh, not tracks. Is this something like this? Ooh, exciting. I think this is this is probably my best work. I'm still riding the high from this particular spaceship. But to give like a spoiler, what it's going to involve is a lot of using this brush here. Oh no, it's at the top. Chalk 01 is going to be using a lot of that brush, and it's going to be doing a lot of, let's make this slightly darker. Oh, let's paint in some nice textures. That's what it's going to be. Oh. But yes, let's come back to this tomorrow. Thank you for watching. I hope that some of the stuff that I did was useful. Again, this will be uploaded to my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel can be found. It's linked from my Twitch channel. So if you go to, there should be a link on the main page of my channel that you can click on. It will take you to my YouTube channel. Currently empty. This is like one of my first streams, so there's nothing particularly exciting there. And yes, and as I said, once this is done, it will be uploaded to Open Game Art, so you can use it in your games if you want, or more likely you can just pull apart the model, and like this PSD is going to be in that file if at all possible, so you can look at all the different layers that I've got set up. And you can pull it apart and dissect it and see how it's put together. Again, thank you for watching. I don't actually have a schedule for when this will be uploaded. I kind of want to upload it after I've finished tomorrow's session as well, because then I will be able to have a link to Open Game Art in the description. But my aim is, I guess, the end of Bank Holiday Monday, as in this coming Monday. Okay then, I will say goodbye. I hope you have a lovely day, lovely evening, depending on your time zone. And thanks for joining me. Goodbye.